All right. Well, I think that everyone has been let into our Zoom meeting here. I wanted to just extend a welcome to everyone that's here today. And for those of you who have participated in other panelist sessions, I may look like a new face. And that's because this is my first time attending one of these panels, even though I've been assisting in, coordinating all of them. But essentially, I have not been at these other panels because I've been doing my own research out on these managed and protected lands. And so, I don't know if anyone else had this similar experience where it was like, oh, COVID ruined my whole year of research in the field last year. And now I am, just in this point earlier this spring where I'm like, am I going out into the field? Am I going out? Oh, okay, now it's go, go, go. So that's definitely the boat that I've been in. And so I guess I just want to say that I really appreciate the ability for people such as our panelists to work on these managed and protected lands and just ensure that researchers like us are able to engage in collecting our samples out in these areas. So without any further ado, I'm going to start by introducing our panelists to all of you. So first up, we have Jay Reddy. And Dr. Reddy is the director of the Santa Cruz Island Reserve, part of the UCSB Natural Reserve System. Prior to this, Jay was a faculty in the anthropology department at UC Santa Cruz and still remains an honorary assistant still retains an honorary assistant professor position there. He earned a bachelor's degree from UCLA in 2006 and a master's degree in 2010, followed by a PhD in 2013 from the Evolutionary Archaeology program at Rutgers University in New Jersey. Dr. Reddy is an archaeologist and a paleoanthropologist with over a decade of experience in human evolutionary sites in East Africa, including running field sites and international field schools in remote areas of northern Kenya and Tanzania. His research interests focus on early stone tool production patterns and the earliest evidence of cultural transmission in human evolution. Growing up in Paso Robles, California, Jay also has a 21-year history of working and teaching on Santa Cruz Island. As the director of the Santa Cruz Island Reserve, Jay is responsible for facilitating the research, educational, and outreach programs for the Santa Cruz Island Reserve. He lives on Santa Cruz Island and on the mainland in the Santa Ynez Valley. His partner, Sarah, and 6-year-old daughter, Nora, both love the islands and the adventure that comes with them, and they have embraced this new adventure as a family. So with that, did you want to take it from there, Jay?
Oh, sure, absolutely. Do you want me to share a little bit about the island now with this?
Yeah, I think right now is perfect.
Sure, great. Well, thank you for the bio, that introduction, and I'm really happy to be here to answer questions and to share a little bit about my background and experience in Santa Cruz Island. So I'm going to share my screen just to give you have a couple minute presentation about Santa Cruz Island. I don't know where all of our viewers are from, so I'm going to give you a little bit of a backstory of Santa Cruz Island and the Natural Reserve System so you understand what we do a little bit. The Santa Cruz Island Reserve is part of the University of California Natural Reserve System, the NRS. That's 41 sites comprising almost 800,000 acres across California that is the largest research reserve system in the world. And in my opinion, Santa Cruz Island is just the gem among them. I mean, it's remote, it's spectacular, but it's also still 20 miles from Santa Barbara. If you're not familiar with the Channel Islands, depending on where you are, they lie right off the coast of Ventura and Santa Barbara, about 20 to 30 miles off the coast. Right where it says Channel Islands National Park there, that is Santa Cruz Island. It's the largest of the Channel Islands. And you have to take a boat out of Ventura to get to the island. Chris has been there many, many times. And once you get to the island, it's about a 3-mile, very bumpy truck ride into to the field station. That big star there is where the field station is. And basically, the Santa Cruz Island Reserve is held on land that's owned by the Nature Conservancy. So the Nature Conservancy bought about 90% of Santa Cruz Island back in 1978. And the UC Reserve on Santa Cruz Island was already there. It's been there since 1966 as a tiny little tent camp for geologists. And over the years, the national park has acquired a bit more land. They own the eastern end of the island. But basically, the Santa Cruz Island Reserve and me directing that, we handle about 99% of the research and education that happens on the island. So all of the permitting, everything kind of goes through UCSB and through the reserve. This is our field station in the main valley. When you get there, you don't even know you're on an island. It has some dorm facilities. It has some private rooms, has bathroom and shower facilities, big communal kitchen, big industrial kitchen. We have a walk-in refrigerator out there. And this has been established, this version of the field station, and then expanding since 1973. We're doing our strategic plan right now. I've just been going through all the numbers, and we have handled something on the order of 190,000 user days out on the island since its inception, which for a remote area is pretty incredible. But the island is really cool because it's so diverse. This is the main valley. It's flanked by a volcanic mountain range on the north side and a really old Jurassic schist mountain range on the south side. Really interesting for a lot of endemic flora and fauna. It's very far to get to some of the farthest reaches. This is these little white buildings you can see out there. That's Christie Ranch, a ranch that was built in the 1850s on the west end of the island. It takes about an hour and a half to drive there from the field station on 4-wheel drive, really bumpy, mountainous roads. But we also have some really windswept, foggy, craggy areas that are just spectacular for intertidal studies. Black abalone has come back tremendously here. A lot of the Santa Barbara sea urchins, starfish are studied a lot with some of the diseases that are affecting them right now. So we have a lot of inter and subtidal research that goes on. And from these really craggy areas, you go to the south side of the island and it looks like Baja California. This is Willows Beach. And the south side is really great for climate research now and changing fog patterns as they're related to sea surface temperature change. We get a lot of different types of research out on Santa Cruz Island because of that. The UC Reserve, I just want to pitch this because you might have some undergrads that will be graduate students or some graduate students that might not know about opportunities. But there's for UC students, there's the Matthias Grant opportunity that allows graduate students to work at the UC Reserves. And we have lots of Matthias Grant recipients working on Santa Cruz Island, but many work at lots of reserves across the state. And that the hope is that really builds collaboration between reserves and comparative data sets. And then we have a lot of education as well, from undergraduate classes to K through 12 classes that will come. I'm a product of a high school class from Paso Robles High School that went out to Santa Cruz Island for field biology. I started going in the late 90s and was immediately hooked and kept coming back, even though I was working in other parts of the world. And when this job opened up, I jumped at it. I feel very, very lucky to have gotten it about 2 years ago. So I'd be happy to talk through any aspects of reserve management, of facilitating research and education, public outreach, donor support, all of those kinds of things. So feel free. I'll just close. This is a little, hopefully you can see the video. These are the famous Santa Cruz Island foxes. If you ever come out to visit, they are all over the field station. Right, Chris?
Oh yeah, I know that I am personally out there to collect various pollinators, but I think that, secretly I'm also out there to, spot the fox every now and then. It feels like a little, treasure every time.
Totally.
Well, yeah, thank you, Jay.
All right. Thank you.
So up next, we have Jessica Reichen. And Jessica Reichen is currently an entomologist at Denali National Park. Jessica received a BA in biology from Smith College in Massachusetts and a master's in the field naturalist program at the University of Vermont and a PhD in entomology from Oregon State University. Over the last 15 years, she has worked on arthropod inventory projects in many national parks, from Boston Harbor Islands to Gates of the Arctic. As part of this work, she is dedicated to sharing her passion for the bizarre and beautiful creatures that run the world with a wide diversity of audiences. Did you, yeah,
Go ahead.
do you have anything you wanted to share?
I have a few slides, but yeah, thank you. I'm very happy to be here and talk to folks, and I will share a screen. Does that work?
Yes.
Wait a minute, though, because I think I'm on the wrong slide. Okay, so yeah, I live in Denali live and work in Denali National Park in Alaska, and Alaska has quite a few national parks, national historic sites, preserves, as you can see. And Denali lies in interior Alaska, and it's one of the larger parks. This is a map of Denali, and you can see the Alaska Range runs right through it. It's 6 million acres. Of course, it's home to the tallest mountain in North America, and many climbers come here. And it has a 92-mile road that was put in the 1930s. That runs from the eastern end of the park into the heart of the park. And not very many parks in Alaska have roads. So Denali, I would say, gets quite a bit of visitation relative to a lot of the parks in Alaska. So, oops, seems to be on a timer. So we get a lot of visitors, and so working as an entomologist in Denali, as Becky will tell you, entomologist is not a very common job title in the National Park Service. There's not too many of us here. So I feel very lucky and privileged to work here. And I work with the natural resources group, and I don't know, there might be 20 people on staff, and that includes wildlife biologists and botanists and GIS folks and geologists, hydrologists, and so forth. And I'll talk a little bit later, but I mean, a large part of my job is research, but because a big mission of the national parks is to educate visitors, I also spent quite a bit of time doing outreach related activities, presentations, working with school groups, making materials for outreach. And I enjoy that part of my job. And I think you kind of have to enjoy that if you want to work in a national park like this one anyway. So obviously it's a beautiful place to work, and I work primarily with pollinators. And like any entomologist, I spend a lot of time with my head, looking at flowers, looking at the ground, but obviously you got to look up once in a while because it's pretty dramatic scenery all around you in Denali. And so lots of different habitats. Our main project that I've been working on is a collaborative effort with some folks from the University of Alaska in Fairbanks. And we've been looking at distributions of arthropod communities along elevation gradients in the park. For us here, as everywhere, I suppose, but in Alaska, climate change is a very big issue and always on our minds. And so a lot of the work we do sort of, we're thinking about how things might change as temperatures increase. And so we're trying to gather a lot of baseline data all the time. And in Alaska, there haven't been a lot of entomologists, so there's still, a lot of discoveries to make here. Along with working in Denali, I'm lucky enough to have had the opportunity to do some pollinator inventories in different parks throughout Alaska. And just to show a couple of pictures, this is a pretty cool park that I would guess a lot of people haven't heard of, Kobuk Valley. And that's above the Arctic Circle, and it includes these amazing dune areas. These are relic dunes from the last glacial period. And you get up into these dunes, they're surrounded by boreal forests, and you really would have no idea where you are. And you would think you were in the desert somewhere. So they have lots of cool endemic plants, and we get to find out what pollinates these plants. And so again, lots of discoveries to make. And then lastly, I was just going to bring you down to the other end here to Klondike Gold Rush National Historical Park. And of course, that commemorates the Chilkoot Trail that miners hiked to get to the gold mines in the 1800s. And that starts down in the temperate rainforest. So it's been fun for me. I've been able to get to a lot of dramatically different kinds of habitats in my work in Alaska. And yeah, there's a lot to explore here. So I will leave it at that and be prepared to answer more questions.
Well, thank you for that. I could probably ask you a million questions about all of the pollinators in all of those parks, but I'll refrain.
Okay.
So up next, we have Becky Nichols. And Becky Nichols has been an entomologist at Great Smoky Mountains National Park in Tennessee and North Carolina since 1997. Her primary responsibilities are to implement the monitoring program for aquatic macroinvertebrates in the park's numerous streams, and to help coordinate the all taxa biodiversity inventory, which is an effort to identify all species in the park. Becky is originally from Spokane, Washington, and has a Bachelor of Science degree in wildlife biology from Washington State University and a Master of Science degree in entomology from Texas Tech University, and a PhD in entomology from the University of Missouri.
Thank you, Chris. Let me share my screen here. How's that?
I'm not seeing anything on my screen.
Just 1 second here.
No worries.
Well, I'm not sure what's going on if you still can't see it.
1 sec here.
I can try to make you co-host again, and we'll see if that helps. Okay, Becky, I think you can try again and see if
Okay.
it works.
It might be something with like dual monitors or
Yeah, I was
the view.
wondering about that too.
Yeah, I do have
Move
two
it.
monitors.
Move the presentation to the other screen and see if it'll.
I'm sorry.
No worries. You could even share the presentation with me, and maybe I could share my screen, and then I can move the PowerPoint for you.
Okay. So what do I need to do? Send you the presentation?
Yeah, if you send me the presentation through email, then I'll pull it up on my
Okay.
screen.
Okay. Maybe you could move on to the next one and I'll try to get that to you.
Yeah, why don't we do that? So in the meantime, I would like to introduce Brianna Putman. So just for all of you to know a little bit more about Brianna, she is an assistant professor at CSU San Bernardino, and she is a lead coordinator for the City Nature Challenge Inland Empire. And so I thought that it would be a really great opportunity for her to participate in this panel today so that she can encourage all of us to get out and explore all of the splendors of nature and help to record and monitor all of the biodiversity out there. So a little bit more about Brianna. As I said, she is an assistant professor in biology at Cal State San Bernardino. She received her PhD in ecology from the joint doctoral program at UC Davis and San Diego State University. She holds a bachelor's degree in biology and a minor in Spanish from Cal Poly State University, San Luis Obispo. Her lab takes an integrative approach in understanding animal habitat interactions in a changing world. They answer questions regarding if animals can respond appropriately, how they accomplish this, and why some are better than others at dealing with rapid environmental change. They use community science, also called citizen science, field studies of wild populations, and laboratory work to quantify phenotypic and genetic responses. Overall, output from the lab has informed the conservation and management of wildlife in human-dominated habitats. So with that.
Yeah, thanks so much. Yeah, so I'm not a manager, but I'm here to promote the City Nature Challenge in the Inland Empire region, which starts on Friday and then ends on Monday. So I'm just going to share, I have a brief presentation on that. Okay, so hopefully you all can see that. Why isn't it? There it goes. Okay, great. So I'm gonna, after my presentation, I'll put a bunch of links in the chat because I know it's hard to memorize all these links. But I just wanna first direct you to on iNaturalist, if you're familiar with iNaturalist, which is a website, we have a project page for our City Nature Challenge, which again starts on Friday. So this is like our banner for our project page and the link right here. I'll put this in the chat at the end. So this is, I did my postdoc at the Natural History Museum of Los Angeles County. So I also do have some experience working in kind of like a non-traditional university setting. So if you're interested in learning more about working in a museum, I'm happy to chat about that too. And working at the museum is where I got involved with citizen science. And we're now kind of transitioning to the term community science because it's just a little bit more inclusive. And the Natural History Museum and the California Academy of Sciences up in San Francisco are the two institutions that started the City Nature Challenge back in 2016. So there's often a lot of times like natural history museums, or even in like I don't know about national parks, but I know a lot of state parks and other organizations often have like community science offices. And so getting involved is another kind of way in which like you can have a different career path outside of academia, is kind of getting people involved in community science. So what is the City Nature Challenge? So it's basically a friendly competition among cities around the world to just get out and collect biodiversity data. It's really focused on collecting data in urban areas because lots of urban areas are private property. So it's really hard for scientists to get out and understand what's going on in these areas. And it's a great way for the general public to just learn about their local nature. So the main steps are to get out, search for wildlife, so plants, animals, fungi, or any evidence of life, take a picture, and then those pictures are shared to an online community. And for this event, we use the platform iNaturalist, which is a community science platform that you can download as like an app on your phone, and it's really easy to use. So yeah, I suggest downloading the iNaturalist app. It's really straightforward and easy to use, and a great way to learn about nature around you and to contribute this sort of biodiversity data that scientists can use. And the reason these observations are valuable is each of these points. So on this map, I think I have UCR centered here. Each of these points on the map is a single observation of some nature that someone has uploaded. And embedded in this observation is going to be locality information, so like GPS points, temporal information, so a time and date stamp, and then a photo voucher, so a photo of that organism that scientists might also extract data from. So maybe it's a color morph, maybe it has like, there's some evidence of injury, maybe there's evidence of parasitism. And so it's a great way to crowdsource data for scientific research. What's really awesome about the City Nature Challenge, so it was started in 2016, so right here, and this little line chart shows the number of observations submitted to iNaturalist per week, and we can see that every time a City Nature Challenge event occurs, there's a huge spike of observations that are submitted to iNaturalist, which we would expect because it's like the event is for this reason. But then you will notice that after each event, the baseline is shifted upward. So the people continue to use the app. And so we're accumulating large data sets that can, over time, maybe we can look at how things are changing over time as human activity is altering habitats around us. So last year was the largest year. It was 244 cities around the world. And this was our first year participating. And this was even this was like in the midst of the pandemic. So we were really worried, like we weren't gonna have anyone participating. But we made almost 1 million observations collectively, which was awesome. And even documenting down here, it says over 1,300 rare and endangered species, which it was a great success last year. This year, so I just wanted to show some of our results from last year. So it was our very first year. And again, this was like in April. So the pandemic had like kind of just started, everything was shut down. We couldn't have any in-person events. And even though it was our first year, we still made over 11,000 observations, which was really awesome. Over 1,800 species were recorded, and we had over 500 people participate. So we're hoping to like shatter these numbers this year. And this is so what we define Inland Empire as all of San Bernardino and Riverside counties, so a really big area. But you'll notice, so this is sort of like a density map of where the observations occurred. So you'll notice that they're heavily centered in like where human populations are are highest. So in like the urban areas and to the west of the mountains. We don't have as many observations in the desert, so we are hoping to expand out a little bit more this year. Okay, so here's some important dates if you're interested in participating. So starting Friday through Monday is the time to get out and take your photographs. Then we have about a 5-day grace period to upload those photographs, but they had to have been taken during the weekend period. And then we will announce the results on May 10th. So how many total observations we had, and we can compare ourselves to other regions. This is our city map for this year. So you'll notice there's tons of cities participating. I think we have close to 450 around the world. So even more than last year. Within California, we have 6 regions that are participating. And so you'll notice that in Southern California, we have Los Angeles County, Inland Empire, Orange County, and San Diego County. So we can compare how we're doing with these other regions. And then there's sort of like the Bay Area or Northern California regions. And for whatever reason, we haven't been able to mobilize Central California yet. So again, I'll put some links into the chat in case you're interested in learning more, and you can join our project. So once you join iNaturalist, you can join our project page. This will say join, and you can become a member. So first, you want to create an iNaturalist account, join our project page to receive updates, and get out this weekend in San Bernardino and Riverside counties, and just any wild plants, animals, fungi, protists are also can be recognized. You can submit to the app. And I provided my contact info in case you want to learn more or have any questions. I think that's, oh, and then my final thing was just some like interesting observations. So the reason why this is important, so last year, or no, this was 2 years ago, one person in Long Beach took a photo of this bird, and they might have said like, that's, I don't know, cool bird. But they didn't realize that this bird hadn't been observed in this area since 2005. So they thought maybe it's been extirpated from the region. So this provides some interesting, scientific data. We often get first records of species in the country or in the state. So this is a non-native flatworm that is I think native to Japan, and we had the first record in the US in 2019 through the City Nature Challenge. We get some dietary information from species, so some interesting like feeding observations. This one's one of our local observations of a desert centipede eating a side blotch lizard. So just really awesome things that people observe and submit. And then I wanted to end with my very favorite observation from last year, which is San Diego surfers surfing on a wave that had bioluminescent dinoflagellates. And so this was a valid observation because of the dinoflagellates. So this was pretty cool. Okay, I think that's it.
Thank you so much for that. And we have one question related to the City Nature Challenge. Someone asked, can people not in the state participate this weekend?
Yes, so the City Nature Challenge is occurring all over the world. So I can put in the chat, there's a whole list of regions and cities that are participating. So maybe where you're at is a place that is participating. And then there's also a different project page for basically City Nature Challenge orphans who are not in a region where their particular city is participating, but you can still submit to iNaturalist, and then your observations will be filtered to what's known as the global project page. So it's basically, if you're not in a designated area, your observations will still be valuable and will filter into this project page. So I can put that info in the chat too.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And with that, I was able to get Becky's PowerPoint uploaded. And so I will start by one second here. All right, so then I will present. And then just let me know, Becky, when you would like to switch slides and
Okay.
everything like that.
Okay. So again, thank you, Chris, and sorry for the technical glitch there. Glad you were able to fix that. I'll just open with a photo of the Smokies. We're known for having these layers of mountains and vistas that kind of go on for a long way. So this is just a view. I'll show you a few more as we go along. So next slide, please. So for those of you who may not be familiar with the Great Smoky Mountains National Park, it's in the states of Tennessee and North Carolina. About half of the park is in each state. It was established in 1934. It's fairly large with 500,000 acres. Not nearly as large as some of those Alaska parks, but for the East, it's fairly big. It is designated as an International Biosphere Reserve and a World Heritage Site. And those designations are primarily because of this biodiversity that's found here. Next slide. So we do get a fair amount of rainfall. It is considered a temperate rainforest. We get 80 to 100 inches of rain and snow at the higher elevations, 50 to 60 inches at the lower elevations. Next slide. And some of the dominant forest types that we find, typically above 4,500 feet, we get the spruce fir high elevation forests. And then as you move downslope, you get into the northern hardwoods. Next slide. And then at the lower elevations, we see the very rich cove hardwoods. We do have 130 species of trees, which is quite diverse for trees. And we do have the largest amount of old growth left in the eastern US, and some trees up to 600 years old. Next slide. We do have a lot of streams in the park, over 2,000 miles of streams, ranging in size from the first order streams, which are basically springs coming out of the ground, up to sixth order streams. And most of the water in the park originates within the boundaries of the park. So we don't have to deal a lot with external impacts to the streams. Although acid deposition can be an issue, we do have some pH drops that occur from time to time. So that's something that we monitor heavily. We are part of the Tennessee River watershed. So all the water in the park actually flows into the Mississippi. It does not flow east of the park. Next slide. So a big part of what I do is monitor aquatic macroinvertebrates. And that's part of this program, this National Park Service-wide program called Vital Signs Monitoring. And so each park determines what they consider to be their vital signs. It can vary a lot depending on where you are. And so one of our vital signs is freshwater communities, including fish and aquatic insects. And so together, we have a fish biologist and myself, and we monitor each of our organisms. And together, we kind of look at long-term trends of the data to determine if our streams are in good shape or if there's a decline where we need to target more research towards that particular stream. But generally, we go out to a stream and we do a 100-meter section of stream and look at abundance and diversity of all aquatic insects that we find. Next. But we do focus particularly on the EPTs. If you are familiar with that term, that refers to the Ephemeroptera, Plecoptera, and Trichoptera pictured here. Those tend to be the groups that show the most sensitivity to any stream disturbances. So those are the three that we focus on tremendously. There can be a lot of different species amongst all these groups. For example, amongst the caddisflies, we have 230 different species. So each of these insect orders are extremely diverse. Next. Another project that I've been working on since I started here is the ATBI, or the All Taxa Biodiversity Inventory. And it's a project to basically learn all the different species that live in the park, not just aquatic insects, not just mammals, fish, all the typical things that that a lot of parks know about. We felt like we really needed to better understand all species so that we could have the information to better manage the park. And so it's not just accumulating a species list, but also understanding where they are, what their environment is, ecological information, what are the interactions with other species, etc. So that project has been going on for well over 20 years now. Next. We've had taxonomists from all over the country sampling different environments. For example, on the right, you'll see someone sampling algae from these wet walls. On the upper right, or excuse me, upper left, we've got water mite researchers. You've got a lepidopterist looking for butterflies there, and then black lighting. So it varies. It depends on the group. We'll see all sorts of different techniques for sampling throughout the park. Next. So far, the numbers keep climbing, but when we first started this project, we knew about 9,600 species in the park. And since then, we've added over 10,000 species that are named species. So these are species that, you know, could be quite common. They were just never really, nobody ever really looked that hard to find them. For example, on the left, we've got a woody plant that we didn't know was here. And you would think that the vascular plants would have been really well documented by now. So some of the new discoveries were quite surprising. Next slide. In addition to the new records, we've also found a number of things that are new to science. And so we're well over 1,000 new to science. And these are species that have not been described before, but don't necessarily only live in the park. They could be part of a regional study throughout the eastern US, or some are endemic to the park and only found here, but others have a little wider distribution. But basically, 1,031 of the species that have been documented here have been described as new. Next slide. And just real briefly, some of the other projects that I'm also involved in, especially this time of year, we're gearing up for the big synchronous firefly display, which will be happening the first week of June. And so that becomes a big public event, and we're exploring different aspects of firefly tourism and making sure that we're doing everything we can to protect the resources and limit the number of people that go into the forest to view these synchronous fireflies. Next. Another thing that's coming up very soon in the upper right there, we got the periodical cicadas that are coming out. Brood 10 will be emerging as we speak. Probably are not calling yet, but get ready to hear about, you know, deafening chorus calls of the periodical cicadas. Again, we have a lot of people interested in that. And so the insects have been getting a lot of press lately, which is great. Monarch tagging, we get monarchs coming through here that migrate to Mexico. So we have some of our educational partners work a lot on Monarch Watch and do a lot of the tagging so that we know for sure that our monarchs go to Mexico. And in the lower right is the rusty patch bumblebee, which, as you all probably know, has been listed as federally endangered, and it used to be fairly abundant in the park. With our early sampling with the ATBI, we did collect some of these, and now we can't find them anywhere. And so they've not been seen in the park since 2003. But we keep looking, so it's one of our ongoing projects to always be on the lookout for certain species that we haven't seen in many years. Okay, next slide. I believe that's it. So thank you. I'd be happy to take any questions.
All right. Well, thank you for that, Becky. That was really great. I know one thing about living on the West Coast is you don't get the amazing fireflies like you do on the eastern part. So But I think that I wanted to open this up with an initial question. Um, I wanted to get your thoughts about what a typical day looks like and what are some of your duties and responsibilities at your job slash career, and what does work-life balance look like? For anyone who would like to answer that.
I'd be happy to jump in with that. For this is going to vary a lot, I'm sure, for all of us here. But a typical day for me, I would say there is no typical day, and that's for better or for worse. But especially the last year with COVID has been very interesting for field research. Generally, for me with Santa Cruz Island, I can be on the island when I need to be. I have a lot of obligations on the mainland as well, so there's some back and forth with that. The last year, I've been on the mainland a lot more than would be regular. But we have so many different groups that come out to the island for so many different reasons. For repeat visitors, a lot of my staff can take care of the day-to-day there. For new researchers, for groups that I'm trying to build collaborations with, or to partner with other research groups or educational groups, I try to be there on the island, especially for first-time users. There's a lot of variability depending on where people are sampling on the island. If they're staying at the field station and can just walk to where they're sampling, that's one thing. But if you need a vehicle, some people can drive four-wheel drive stick shift and be totally fine, and others need some assistance with that kind of event. So it really depends day to day. And that does, to your second question, I think, was work-life balance. It's, this job, you never turn it off. And so I'm on call. If somebody needed to be emergency, like there was an emergency on the island in the middle of the night, right? It would be my phone ringing to help coordinate helicopter evacuation, right? Like there's things that will just happen and you have to be aware. Now those things are rare. But at the same time, for me and for my lifestyle and for my family's lifestyle, it works really well to be able to split time between some really beautiful places. I have a 7-year-old daughter, and every time we're on the island, she's off with researchers and undergrad students and learning about all kinds of different things. And it's pretty idyllic in a lot of ways for that. But previous to this, with my research in East Africa, I would have to be gone 3 to 4 months out of the year for a very specific field season. And that presents its own work-life challenges as well. So this one, it's kind of constant, but I'm not traveling as far for as long. And my family can travel with me as well. So was there another component to that, or is that?
I think that you covered most of the bases for that.
Sure.
Mainly, yeah, the typical day, work-life balance, and duties and responsibilities.
Yeah, and I could add that for the UC Natural Reserve System, most of the reserves across the state, they are resident directors. So you're provided, the university provides some form of residence or housing on the reserve because you need to be there as well. So there's there is that expectation in the job for sure.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Did anyone else want to chime in on that?
I can jump in. I would agree that there isn't really a typical day. It does vary a lot seasonally in my position anyway. But yeah, you never know what's going to happen in any given day. But generally in the summer, I'm out in the field a lot, and I have a couple employees that come in. But then when the season's over, it's time to do lab work and computer work, email, all the administrative stuff that goes along with it. So yeah, it's highly seasonal, and there frequently is things pop up and you got to change course all the time.
Are you done, Becky?
Yes.
I'll chime in a little on the work-life balance too. I mean, that's always been a very important consideration to me. And I think when I went into graduate school to get my PhD, I kind of knew that I wasn't going to go into academia. And partly just because to me, that was just an all-consuming job with research and teaching and all the other responsibilities. But then looking around for other places to be an entomologist, it was kind of a challenge because, for federal agencies, usually if they hire entomologists, it's for pest management. And that wasn't something I was really interested in. And I think Becky and I really have lucked out. I mean, I got to know Becky a little bit my postdoc when I was working on the Boston Harbor Islands, doing also an ATBI, but in a very different kind of park. But the kind of job where you can sort of celebrate biodiversity and make new discoveries and that kind of thing, that's not an easy thing to find. And I feel like I've sort of had to find my own way to almost creating a job for that. But so for me, work-life balance was very important. And I'm very passionate about entomology and I love the work that I do, but there are lots of other things I like to do as well. So it's important for me that I live in a place that I want to live in and that I have time to do some of those other things too. And so that more and more, I have made that a priority. I mean, you have to make sacrifices sometimes, but sort of look towards what you really want. So that's that part. And then quickly, I just thought as an example of what a typical day looks like, I just tried to think of what I did yesterday. And I think actually my little list is pretty representative of the kinds of things that I do. In the morning, I gave a presentation to a Rhodes Scholar group. That's like, they used to be called Elder Hostel. And they're doing these virtual programs now because of the pandemic. And they have one on Alaska wildlife. And they invited me to talk about insects. So I thought that was pretty cool that they were even aware enough to think about things other than grizzlies and salmon and that kind of thing. I'm working with an artist, an intern we had a couple years ago to make a bumblebee guide for Alaska. So that kind of stretches beyond our park boundaries. That'll have statewide relevance. I just got 800 new species into our NP species database. So that felt like a big achievement. And that kind of eclipses all the other groups that we have in that database currently, the plants and the mammals and so forth. I'm working on logistics for a field trip this summer to go to Noatak Preserve. And again, that'll be like a week-long inventory. I'm starting on a manuscript on some of the research we've done in the park and also joining in on some other statewide pollinator groups, having meetings for that. So I have a hand in some, Alaska doesn't have very many entomologists. And so collaboration is very key here. And so, and I think working at a park, it can be fairly isolating professionally because I don't have other entomologists around me at all. And so it's very important to make those collaborations with others. So.
Yeah. Did you have anything you wanted to chime in, Bree?
Sure. I don't want to talk too much because I'm in academia, so maybe people are more familiar with what it's like, but I would say work-life balance is tough because we are expected, and it's different depending on which type of university you're at. So for instance, like a UC school is going to have different expectations than a Cal State. But I'm kind of evaluated on research, teaching, and service. So I have to be doing like all three of those things. And because it's my second year and I've just started, I have like no time. I have no free time ever. But again, my days are very flexible or they're always different just because, depending on what day I'm teaching. I would say the one thing that has surprised me most about kind of transitioning from, grad student to postdoc to professor or assistant professor is more of the service component. Because I think when you're a grad student and a postdoc, you're not expected to do a lot of service depending on where you're at. And I just am in meetings all day long. So it's just like the number of like committee meetings and just meeting with like all sorts of things that has overwhelmed me, because I wasn't expecting how many meetings would be expected of me.
Well, thank you for sharing that insight, and I'm glad we were able to book you for a little bit of your time.
It's funny because every week I'm like, I have these 3 days that are totally open, and then by the end of the week, they're totally full. So things just add up quickly.
It looks like we actually have a few questions from our audience, so I want to make sure we cover those. So one question is, how did your previous research help you in preparing for your position now?
I can answer that. So in graduate school, I studied aquatic insects. And so it was kind of a natural when I saw this position being advertised in the Smokies. And it almost was exactly the same type of work I had done as a graduate student. So that was just luck that happened, because I wasn't really looking at a federal agency for employment. I was figuring I'd probably end up at a small university somewhere. So to be honest, when the Smokies job opened, I had to look on a map to see where it was, because I had never been this far east. And it just, again, it just happened to match the type of research that I was experienced in. So that helped me a lot.
Yeah, I can jump.
Oh, go ahead. Go,
Oh,
Jay.
sorry, thanks. So a lot of my experience, so my background is in paleoanthropology, so human evolutionary past. And I worked on a lot of human evolutionary sites between about 1.5 and 2 million years old in Tanzania, Kenya, and Ethiopia. And some of these places were crazy remote. You fly into Nairobi and Kubifora in northern Kenya is it's like 3 days of driving, like 16 hours a day to get there. It's in the middle of nowhere. You have to dig for your water and filter it. You take a bath in the lake, and there's Nile crocodiles and hippos and spitting cobras, and it's a very different kind of field research experience. And I spent 15 years with going out there 3 to 4 months a year doing that, and studying stone tool technology. And so how am I on an island off of the coast of California? Well, there's a few reasons. One, I love the Natural Reserve System. I love the model of it in the UC, and I've had some experience with that in my youth. But also the way that this job was advertised is they needed somebody that had experience running remote field stations. And when I read that, I was like, 20 miles off the coast of Santa Barbara is not nearly as remote as what I'm used to. And there aren't even any poisonous snakes on Santa Cruz Island, so it's not a bad place to be. But also from an academic standpoint, because I was in academia and faculty before this, and still within the UC system here, the questions that I had for the evolution of stone tool technology, I'm really interested in how stone tools can tell us about cultural transmission, how we learn from each other, and what that can tell us evolutionarily about how we learn and relate with other people. I've really studied that for these 2 million year old stone tools, but the complexities of the stone tools on the Channel Islands, which the Native American group there, the Chumash, they made little micro drill stone tools that they would use to make shell bead currency that was traded all over the Western United States. They're one of the only groups on Earth that developed monetary, like currency exchange, money without agriculture first. It's a fascinating stone tool industry. And basically, if I can study that, a lot of the methods that I developed for 2 million-year-old stone tools can also apply to 2,000-year-old stone tools. And that's really interesting from an archaeological perspective. So the fact that I have some of this other more remote field experience has really helped me to wear all of the different hats that I need to here, because I'm not an archaeologist first, right? I'm dealing with people from all kinds of different disciplines. And that's something I really enjoy, is that it's not, it's not focused on my one niche industry in academia. It's really focused on building bigger picture partnerships and facilitating a lot of research that's relevant right now, related to climate change or changing conditions in the Santa Barbara Channel or propagation of fire in Central California. All of those things feel very time sensitive and important. So it's been very rewarding that way.
Yeah, I can piggyback off of that, because I think sometimes it's the skills you have beyond your specific research that are more valuable. I don't want to say more valuable, but add to your skill set. Because for my PhD, my research was super like esoteric, like basic science, understanding the evolution of this really specific signal that ground squirrels give to rattlesnakes. And like, there's no application to that for conservation or really human use. And so when I graduated, I remember just being very, not depressed, but felt like I was set up to fail, because I didn't have any skills. Like, I didn't know how to do modeling. I didn't even know how to use R back then. And then I would go on these postdoc job forums or whatever, and I just felt like I didn't qualify for any of the jobs, because I didn't have any skills other than being able to observe animals and record their behavior, which is like anyone can do that. But I also was a part of an REU, so a research experience for undergraduates program, which takes place in Costa Rica. And I continue to do that every year. And this program is specifically designed for students who've been historically underrepresented in STEM. And so the only reason I did that was just because I didn't know what to do after I graduated, and I saw this opening. So I was like, well, free trip to Costa Rica. I don't know what I'm doing with my life, so it's a temporary position. But that ended up being very valuable, because a lot of universities want to see that you can work with a diverse population of students and that you can mentor undergraduates from diverse populations. And so I think that really set me ahead of a lot of other job applicants, was having this experience with this REU program. When at the time, I just didn't know what I was doing with my life. So, I think sometimes it's not necessarily your specific research, but sort of getting all these different experiences. So, having that field experience, having the theoretical background, but also being able to maybe do other things that other people can't, or maybe don't have the same skills that you have.
Totally. I couldn't agree more. I think for a lot of you that are thinking through these kinds of career options, getting field experience is just first and foremost. You get out there, you interact with a lot of people. You're going to interact with people in different disciplines through field schools or internship opportunities. And then you also get exposure to things that you don't realize are necessarily important with a PhD, right? We think of what grants have you gotten, where have you published, what have you published, can you code in R, what's your stats background, and not like, can you effectively change a tire, right, in the field?
Yeah.
Like, can you figure out how much toilet paper your group is going to need over a month-long stint in the field, right? There are a lot of like practical applications that are life experience things that you need from these from field research. And so I've always, as a professor as well, just really encouraged all of my students to put yourselves out there and find some opportunities. It can be close to campus. It doesn't have to be an international field school someplace, but just start doing some work. It's great.
When I got out of grad school, I was looking for all kinds of different jobs, and I ended up with a postdoc at Harvard that the idea was to coordinate this all taxa biodiversity inventory on the Boston Harbor Islands, which are a group of islands that are a national park, but also it's kind of a partnership. So there's state parks and privately owned islands, but overall they're managed by the National Park Service. So I spent 6 years doing that. It was a postdoc that kind of morphed into being a research associate, and the Great Smoky Mountain ATBI was my model. That's, they had already been going for quite a while, and they hosted meetings every year down in Tennessee that we'd go to, and I had never done anything like that. And of course, Boston Harbor Islands was a very different kind of park than Great Smoky Mountains, small, urban, disturbed, but it made the project that much more manageable. We weren't able to attract a lot of entomologists to come sample, because who wanted to go there to sample? But we found the diversity there was way higher than anyone had expected. And it also introduced me to, because I was working with a national park and they had staff who already did programs in the public schools in Boston and public programs on the island, I could sort of tap into that. And that was a whole new world for me. I had never done a lot of outreach or teaching or that kind of thing. And I really enjoyed it. And I worked with a lot of interns and students and citizen scientists. And it really broadened me beyond the science that I had been doing in grad school. And I got to meet, in the course of doing that, I would go to some of the national meetings where a lot of park biologists went. And so I started to I'm an introvert. I'm not great at, I don't find that I'm great at small talk with people, but you get to know people and you can start networking. And so when that position ended, I was able for a few years just to work off small grants at different parks around the country, because I got to know people and they said, oh, we have some money if you want to come here and do some pollinator work. And ultimately that led to my position at Denali. I had come here once in 2012, just on a grant. And I got to know people at the park and they thought, that's really cool what you're doing. And they got money together to fund a position. So sometimes you just kind of fall into something and the next thing happens and the next thing happens, and you may go off in a completely different direction than you had imagined when you got your PhD in your hand and were ready to go. So I guess the moral is you just really got to be open to opportunities that come your way, even if it's not something you had anticipated.
Jess, were you working with E.O. Wilson with some of his BioBlitz stuff at Harvard?
Yeah, he was the guy that got the money for my project, and we asked him, how many ants do you think are on Boston Harbor Islands? And he guessed 25, and we found 52. So
oh, nice. All right.
We doubled his estimate.
Very cool. Very cool.
Yeah, I think I wanted to follow up with what you were all saying. So kind of, what is it like to work in these reserves and feel like you have to wear those different hats, or you're a jack of all trades in a certain way, where you may just be like that one kind of expert in your field, but you have to engage with people of all these different scientific backgrounds. So how do we, as trained entomologists, really prepare to be able to switch hats?
I'll answer as the lone anthropologist out here. It can be tricky, but I think as you move through, I remember being an undergrad and being totally intimidated by everybody's knowledge, and just being like, how do you get to that point? How are they just citing literature off the top of their head? Being very intimidated by that. And as you learn more, as you become an expert in your field, as you move through it, I don't know, I'm just always humble about it. I enjoy learning from other people, right? So I dabble in a lot of different fields. But like marine biology, I know nothing about marine biology. That is not my background. But you better believe every time we get a group of marine biologists out at the field station, I am chatting them up all the time. I want to know what they're doing. I want to learn about it. But it also affords me the opportunity here to get my scuba license and to start joining and doing some of these things and learning, right? So I like the different hats because you end up really pushing yourself. I don't know. I've always thought of myself as just a lifelong student anyway, right? So you get to learn a lot from your colleagues and from different groups that visit the reserve.
I would second that. I think getting experience in a lot of different areas will always benefit you in some way. One of the things that we try to do with our summer internships here is give them all an opportunity to go work with some of the other groups, like go work for a day with the fisheries crew or go work with the wildlife crew if they're going to tag a bear. Go out with the anthropologists, archaeologists, excuse me, we don't have an anthropologist. And so various roles that we have in the park, we try to give that opportunity to them just to explore, what their interests might be, because some of the interns that come here barely 20, they're not really sure where they're going to go with their college career. And so that helps them to kind of formulate, what their interests really are. And if, like in the case of my interns, if they stay with entomology, that's great, but they have also got this other experience that might come into play at some point in their career. And so I would say just take in as much information as you can get and be a lifelong student and always try to learn and get that information from your colleagues and anybody you can. It'll benefit you.
This is sort of related, but maybe not a direct answer, but I find one of the challenges working in a national park, and especially in Alaska, where people don't come to a national park in Alaska to look at bumblebees. They come to look at grizzlies or catch fish or whatever. And the staff at our parks is very much focused on the charismatic fauna. So having someone here, I feel like a large part of my role here is just to make people aware that there is other wildlife in the parks beyond vertebrates. And I like to be able to kind of try to make connections. So, there's a woman who studies bears here, and that's her thing. And well, the bears in Denali don't feed on fish before they hibernate for the winter. We don't have a lot of fish like the coastal bears do. They eat blueberries, and the blueberries wouldn't be here if the bumblebees weren't. And so I like to try to push those things sometimes. And also I work a lot with the interpretive staff so that they can build programs and things to make visitors more aware of those kinds of connections too. So I feel like interacting with a lot of different kinds of folks in the park and raising the awareness of the things that I study is important, because even with an entomologist on staff, it's pretty easy to ignore a lot of the little things. So yeah.
Well, thank you all for those insights. It looks like we have another question from the audience. They want to know, is it more useful to follow species of interest into working with parks or focus on a regional expertise?
I'm assuming that question is related to like how to target your graduate program towards employment in a national park. Would
Yeah,
that be?
I think that's what is meant by that. Yes.
Yeah, I would say generally, well, as Jessica mentioned, there's not a lot of entomologists in the Park Service. And so many times you could be classified as a biologist instead of an entomologist. And in those roles as biologists, many times you would be doing pest control. I mean, not like spraying pests, but like forest insects and diseases kinds of pest control. Um, in fact, we do have staff here that work on, invasive insects that are impacting our forests. So generally, I would say it would be better to be a little bit broader than that, because your job title will probably encompass a lot of different things and would not be focused on one particular thing. But if you were looking at employment with ARS or something like that, with the Department of Agriculture, the story could be a little different in that agency, because they do a lot of very targeted research for crop pests of different sorts. So it sort of depends on if you're more in the pest realm or more in the environmental biodiversity, environmental kind of job that you're thinking about.
Just to piggyback on that, to what Bree and I were talking about before too, whether you're looking at stone tools or squirrel signals, a lot of times what you're working on with that, if you're following a species of interest, there's a much kind of broader impact or umbrella that you're working under with that species, right? So when you're designing a graduate project, your graduate advisor should be helping you with this, but it should help you to pitch yourself into a much broader area as well, even though your graduate work, your master's, your PhD is focused on something very specific. That should really segue well into a much broader field where it can apply in lots of different scenarios around the world. Even if you're focused on something that's only found in one location, you can take the methodology, or you can take your broader question and you can apply it to a very different place in the world. And so a well-designed project should set you up to do that.
Yeah, and I also agree that it depends on which position you're applying for. But I do think it helps to be familiar with the area that you're applying to work in. At least when I had my interview at Cal State San Bernardino, they asked about how I would use the local environment. And if you're not familiar with the area, you're not going to be able to answer that question. So, they wanted to hear like, oh, we could go to the desert and do these things. We could do elevational transects because we're along the base of San Bernardino Mountains. We can go to the coast and do these things. So you definitely want to be familiar with whatever region you're proposing to work in or you're applying to work in, because then that's going to make you stand out above the rest of the candidates who maybe haven't done their research on that area.
Well, I think with that, there was a comment made by someone in the audience. I don't know who it was specified to, but maybe it will speak to them when I read the comment. So as I remember, Bruce Sutton and Gary Steck published some tephrid study in the park.
Yeah, that would be here. Yeah, we're familiar with, I know those two well, and they did a lot of tephritid picture wing flies, fruit flies. They did a lot of their work in the park, and we're still in touch with them. I saw Bruce not too long ago.
Awesome. Well, I guess if there aren't, okay. They said thank you. So I guess with that, we could, if there aren't any other questions, maybe I'll give anyone in the audience just like another minute or so to post a question if they want to, but we are technically out of time at 4:30. So I guess we could end just a few minutes early. I think, this has been a really, there's one more question. Is it generally more useful to pursue a degree in entomology or environmental science and management?
I don't know if it really, well, I don't know, but in my mind, I'm not sure it matters that much. It's more what you study and who you study with. And I know when I was looking for a PhD program, I think Oregon State was the only entomology program I applied to because the people I wanted to work with were in a variety of programs depending on the school. I mean, most schools don't have entomology programs, even though they may have somebody working on insects and insect related questions. So I don't know, maybe somebody else knows better than me, but I wouldn't think it would matter. I mean, I suppose it's gonna affect what kinds of classes you take and what required classes you have. So I don't know.
I think that's a good point, that there may not be as many entomology departments as there used to be. We see them often get combined into the plant sciences or given a slightly different name where it doesn't say your degree is actually entomology. But you could be doing the same kind of work that an entomologist or somebody with an entomology actual degree would, the same type of experience. So it may not matter that much. What's really critical is what type of work you've done and the coursework. So I would make sure your coursework and experience are tailored towards kind of where you want to end up and the type of work you'd like to do.
And I think, okay, there's another question. What are opinions on bioblitzes versus more controlled and methodical taxonomic inventories?
I would say that bioblitzes have their role and they can be done in a number of different ways. And we've done a number of different types here. We've had some that have been organized by taxonomists, and they spend like a week here with authorities from all over the world coming in to sample in particular areas, identify things on site, compile everything in the database, georeference, I mean, everything you can think of. It goes from that extreme all the way to a one-day event where a bunch of school kids are brought in to just experience what it's like to get out and sample. In one case, you're getting a lot of really good, useful data. In the other, you're probably not, but you're providing an experience and creating a bond with, the younger kids that need to experience, nature, and we're developing future stewards and making that outreach possible. So it kind of depends on what your goal is, and you can do them any way that you want, really.
I agree. I one of the things that we're implementing out at the island is, especially for high school classes, you have like an army of very capable young students, and you at that age and with their experience, you can't give really complicated methodologies. But if you're trying to set up some vegetation transects to identify one or two species, whether it's present or absent, or to quantify how much is there, you can train them in a couple of species to identify and send them out and collect a huge amount of data really, really quickly. So if the project is right, I think kind of the BioBlitz approach and citizen science is just fantastic. If you need something that's much more specific and technical, and you need the training to do that, it's going to be slower going and probably fewer people to do it. And that is equally important and probably more important, but it depends on the project. And we've seen a lot of success with the students producing good data and just coming away like super passionate about something because they've engaged in it.
Yeah, and I think you really have to set your expectations correctly relative to the event. So I feel like sometimes these bio blitzes that are more oriented just to get kids and people, citizen scientists involved and collecting things, they're advertised as really contributing a lot to science, and that's not always the case. And it makes some people skeptical about the whole idea of bio blitzes. But I mean, there are ways. I mean, Becky had an extreme example of just scientists coming and spending a week. And I mean, that's scientifically, that's the best case scenario. And you can have somewhere in the middle where you have an entomologist coordinating the activity and making sure samples get somewhere to be identified and curated. Or you just have people coming, collecting stuff and letting it go or whatever. But you have a whole group of people that are now really excited about insects. And that's a great product of a BioBlitz too.
Yeah, I agree with what everyone says. It just kind of depends on what your goal is. What's the point of doing the survey? And BioBlitzes are just great for getting non-scientists excited about research, and it's kind of like a low stakes event and just a great fun thing to do. But I have been a part of expert BioBlitzes, sort of like how Becky was talking about, where we've invited groups of like taxonomic experts to a region, and then we use iNaturalist to document what's there. So there's sort of like a range of different BioBlitzes you could have, where it could be with kids or maybe college students, all the way up to experts in their field.
Well, thank you all for insight on that. With the last few minutes that we have, I want to end the topic with, I guess, for anyone who's interested in pursuing or looking for a career in park management and services, what are the best resources for them, like job boards or anything like that?
USA Jobs is the primary website for looking for any federal openings. And so always be checking there. And I would encourage trying to get experience through internships or seasonal positions, wherever you can. If you're really interested in getting like National Park Service, for example, a lot of different parks will get interns in seasonal positions, typically for the summer season. So keep your eyes open for those.
Yeah, the National Park Service or parks I've worked with use a program called, well, it used to be called Geoscientists in Parks, and now they've changed it to Scientists in Parks. And it's a program through which you can get internships in parks. And I'm sure there's a website that doesn't get advertised through USA Jobs. It used to be through the Geological Society, but I'm not sure where they have it. But if you Googled Scientists in Parks, you could, and there are some cool opportunities all over the country in national parks. And you do get a stipend. You don't get paid a lot, and you get housing and travel to the park. And we get a lot of interns. I've personally had several interns through that program, and there are some other like SCA and others, that ways you can intern with parks. And a lot of parks, just because they don't have a lot of money to hire lots of technicians, will use a lot of interns in the field seasons. So if you can afford not to make a lot of money, it's a good way to get experience and make contacts and so forth.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I forgot to mention where the internship announcements typically are. At least in our area, we utilize the Southeast Conservation Corps, and SCA is another one, as Jessica mentioned, Conservation Legacy, AmeriCorps, there's a lot of these different types of internship type organizations that will advertise positions in national parks.
Also, just encourage everybody to talk to your professors, some of the professors that you respect, about what's going on. Some might be able to direct you to grad students that need some lab assistance. Some of them have local research. Some of them might have local job boards that they know of, to just kind of talk locally about what's going on. And there's often a lot of opportunity kind of right around you, that you just need to go ask about.
Awesome. Well, thank you all for all of that awesome information, history on the lands that you work on, info about City Nature Challenge that is coming up this weekend. So hopefully we'll, all get out there and take some observations and maybe hit up some parks on the way when we're, done. So thank you all for participating, and feel free to email me with any questions, and